Just when you thought the legal storm surrounding Sean Diddy Combs couldn't get any more severe, a massive new lawsuit has dropped in Los Angeles, and this one introduces a deeply disturbing angle that implicates not just Diddy, but the very industry gatekeepers tasked with protecting young talent. A lawsuit filed on June 8, 2026 by a proxy under the
Everything was already falling apart. At least, that's what people thought. The headlines had been relentless for months. Every day seemed to bring another twist, another courtroom development, another shocking claim that sent the internet into a frenzy.
Pseudonym John Y.H. Rowe alleges a horrific incident of childhood sexual assault dating back to 2007. But what makes this complaint uniquely explosive is who else is being dragged into court. The plaintiff isn't just suing Diddy, he is also suing his former talent managers and agencies, specifically Lang Talent, Deidre Lang, Amsel Eisenstadt, and Frazier, claiming they actively marched him into a dangerous situation to protect their own business interests. Today, we are breaking down the official court documents to look at the exact allegations, the intense pushback from Diddy's camp, and the bizarre legal chaos unfolding around this empire. My name is Jackson Buhai, your host of In the Know. Let's get right into it. Let's start with the background context provided in this complaint. The plaintiff, John Rowe, launched his career as a childhood actor in 2004. By May of 2007, he was still a minor under the age of 18, trying to break into higher profile Hollywood roles. To do that, he hired talent managers Deidre Lang, Lang Talent, and the Amsel agency. Legally speaking, when an adult talent agency takes on a minor, the law recognizes what's called a special relationship. According to the filing, these agents held themselves out as protectors and gatekeepers. They had a strict duty of care to vet the events they sent this child to, confirm parental consent, provide an adult chaperone, and ensure he wasn't isolated with powerful adult industry figures. But the lawsuit alleges that the agents completely abandoned him. According to the complaint, in May 2007, the agents sent the minor plaintiff an invitation to an industry networking event in the Hollywood Hills. Neither of his agents actually attended the event with him. No chaperone was arranged and no safety plan was put in place. While mingling at the party, the plaintiff noticed Sean Diddy Combs. Shortly after that, Diddy allegedly approached the underage actor, made small talk about his past work, and said he wanted to speak with him privately about an upcoming project he was producing. The lawsuit states Diddy guided the minor into one of the back rooms and shut the door behind them. Diddy then allegedly offered the minor a sip of his alcoholic beverage. The plaintiff took a few sips and quickly began to feel the effects. What follows in the court document is an explicit account of sexual battery. The filing alleges that Diddy began rubbing the plaintiff's arm, and when the minor stated he felt uncomfortable, Diddy allegedly ignored his pleas, moving his hands down the minor's body, pulling down his clothes, and performing oral copulation on him while simultaneously touching himself. Afterward, Diddy allegedly pulled up his pants, told the minor he'd see where they would go from there regarding the acting role, and walked out, leaving a traumatized teenager alone in a back room in complete shock. Unsurprisingly, Diddy's team is fighting back aggressively against these claims. His representatives released a statement to us completely blasting the lawsuit, calling the allegations from this quote so-called nameless child actor false and ridiculous. They went on to label the plaintiff as just another hater in a long list of people trying to get in on the money gravy train encouraged by personal injury lawyers, firmly stating that Mr. Combs has never sexually assaulted anyone, including any child. In fact, Diddy's camp is reportedly getting so fed up with the mounting civil lawsuits that they are now threatening legal action of their own, looking to target accusers whom claim they are fabricators jumping on a bandwagon for a quick payday. Meanwhile, while all of this is happening, the ripple effects of Diddy's ongoing legal saga are tearing through other high-profile relationships. In a wild twist, a former
Commentators had spent countless hours trying to predict what would happen next. Supporters insisted the storm would eventually pass. Critics argued that the worst was still ahead. But nobody expected what happened this week. Just when it seemed impossible for the situation to become more complicated, a brand new lawsuit emerged and completely changed the conversation. The filing landed like a bombshell. Within hours, social media exploded. News channels scrambled to cover every detail. Legal analysts began debating what the latest claims could mean for an already chaotic legal battle. And suddenly, questions started appearing everywhere. How much worse can this get? What happens if even more people come forward? And is this only the beginning? Because according to the latest developments, the legal nightmare may be entering an entirely new phase. The timing couldn't be more dramatic. For weeks, public attention had already been focused on previous accusations, ongoing disputes, and a growing mountain of legal problems. Every hearing seemed to create more controversy. Every state
Male escort named Clayton Howard, who previously sued Diddy, has turned his sights on Diddy's ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura. Howard filed a court declaration going off on Cassie, claiming she was absolutely not an innocent victim in Diddy's infamous freak-off parties, and he alleges that Cassie was actually an active, engaged participant who willingly manipulated and exploited others, including himself, to satisfy Diddy's depraved desires. Cassie's legal team fired back immediately, accusing Howard of launching a public campaign to harass and intimidate her, even threatening her on social media. Cassie has since requested an emergency court hearing to stop him from publicly attacking her. It is just pure chaos, proving that the fallout from Diddy's past is dragging everyone associated down with him. To wrap it all up, let's look at where Diddy actually is right now. He is currently serving a 50-month federal prison sentence at Fort Dix in New Jersey following his conviction on prostitution-related charges. But a brand new update from the Federal Bureau of Prisons reveals that Diddy's projected release date has actually been moved up yet again. Originally set to get out later in 2028, his release date has officially been shaved down to February 23rd.
Biggie and Tupac and insinuations there, and kind of going a little bit deeper into his upbringing and his career, a little bit further beyond what a lot of other people have covered.
By the way, yeah, we're talking cease and desist letter here, potential legal action, maybe financial repercussions. You might not relate to all this. Let me tell you something that a lot of Americans relate to. Credit card debt. Okay, this is real. This isn't an accident. Every call, every fee, every high interest trap, it is a system designed to keep Americans stuck. The banks profit, the creditors win, but real families lose. Today's sponsor, though, PDS Debt, helps people fight back. So whether it's credit cards or personal loans or medical bills, PDS Debt has customized options to help you pay off debt faster. And in fact, there's no minimum credit score required. Plus, they're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. The system can make you feel like you're drowning financially, which is why I want you all to find solutions to your debt. It is your money. It's your future. Do not let the system decide for you. You are 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/sidebar. That's pdsdebt.com/sidebar, pdsdebt.com/sidebar. Yeah, and it wasn't even really about the trial, maybe because that was oversaturated, maybe because everybody was watching our coverage here on Law and Crime about the trial. And by the way, found out that my voice and Elizabeth Milner's voice, Queen Elizabeth, were both in the documentary, I think in like episode 4 when it was going into the trial or in his arrest. You know, it was interesting. I'll talk more, I am curious about what you think of that footage, and we'll talk about how it factors into the cease and desist letter. First of all, no attorney-client privilege, because if he is actively, deliberately, knowingly recording that, the privilege, anything that he says to his attorney, that's waived, right?
Correct. So that was one of the first thoughts I had is, he's speaking to Mark Agnifilo, who's the lead attorney on his legal team. They're talking about, overall case strategy, the indictment that they expect to come down. My first thought was, we've never seen this before. This must be privileged. But again, you forget there's a videographer in the room. So when you think about attorney-client communications, yes, that's usually covered under privilege. But if you have a third party that you're inviting into those communications, that's not necessary, unless the person is an interpreter or maybe an accountant. If you have a videographer that's there not for legal reasons, you can make that argument that, the privilege is waived.
And by the way, that conversation, the actual context of it, it's something that we always were thinking was going on behind the scenes. There was a sense of frustration about how the media and social media was portraying Diddy and the narrative, and he was like, we're losing, and he was getting a bit combative.
Statement generated fresh speculation. Every update triggered another wave of intense reactions online. Then came the lawsuit. The details immediately grabbed attention. Not necessarily because people knew whether the claims were true or false, but because of the seriousness of what was being alleged. The filing painted a disturbing picture. It contained accusations that instantly became the center of public discussion. Supporters dismissed the claims as another attempt to capitalize on an already high-profile situation. Critics argued that the allegations fit into a much larger pattern that had been developing for months. Either way, the lawsuit achieved one thing almost instantly. It made an already massive controversy even bigger. And that's where things become especially interesting. Because lawsuits don't exist in a vacuum. When one filing appears, People start asking questions about other filings. They begin comparing timelines. They examine previous statements. They revisit old interviews. They search for connections. They look for inconsistencies.
With Mark Agnifilo about what was going on. And he's like, look, I did everything. You said I'm basically an ideal client, a star client. I did everything you want. I came to New York. And like, he was just waiting to see if he would be arrested and indicted. And that was like a bit of tension there, which it's a rare behind the scenes glimpse of what those conversations and what those moments are between an accused and their defense attorney before the hammer drops.
Yes, very rare. And that's, I think, one of the things that struck me and what a lot of people are talking about. Again, you don't usually get a window into that. I think the push and pull was, in the conversation, Mark Agnifilo had said, look, an indictment hasn't been dropped yet. The indictment came down September 16th of last year. And Mark Agnifilo had said it's mid-September at that point. So I think the indictment was really just about to drop. So at that point, you have Diddy who, he said, look, I've come to New York. I've basically surrendered. His legal team is taking the position you have to cooperate and kind of show that you're here ready to take this head on. But then Diddy's sort of saying, we need to get someone out there on the comms front, as somebody who is, in his words, has dealt with the dirty side of media and propaganda. So I think what Diddy was trying to say was, there's nothing to be done legally on the criminal front because no indictment had been dropped yet. But in the court of public opinion, it seemed like he wanted to take a more aggressive approach to put a certain message out there. And his attorney seemed to kind of think the opposite.
And just to be clear, so the documentary begins with this shot of Combs in his hotel room in New York. This is, I believe, just 6 days before his arrest last year. Turns out Combs had hired this videographer to film him while he's in New York. The documentary's producers got their hands on this footage, and he's talking on speakerphone with Mark Agnifilo, this high-powered attorney, who is, by the way, just one of several lawyers he would have on his multi-person legal team, and says that more needs to be done to help his public image, that it appeared to him like they were losing. And remember, again, this is before he was officially indicted and arrested. Now, apparently he knew it was coming. He'd been under investigation for months at this point. In a statement to NBC News, Combs' publicist, Judah Engelmeyer, said, quote, "The footage was created for an entirely different purpose under an arrangement that was never completed, and no rights were ever transferred to Netflix. A payment dispute between outside parties does not create permission for Netflix to use unlicensed private material. None of this footage came from Mr. Combs or his team, and its inclusion raises serious questions about how it was obtained and why Netflix chose to use it." Now, Elizabeth, we're going to talk more about what Combs' legal team has to say in this cease and desist letter, but what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, it's hard to say because there's still such a big question mark in the air because, Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent, is one of the executive producers on this series. Him, the director, Netflix in general, is not saying where they got this footage, only that it was obtained legally. Diddy's side is saying this is coming from a videographer I hired. I know we'll get into the cease and desist. One of the arguments they make is, this is subject to NDAs or agreements that the videographer had signed with Diddy because he was, employed by Diddy, and therefore the footage belongs to Diddy. That's the argument that they're making. So it's difficult to say because Netflix is not really saying how or where they got this footage from. One of the things that they did say was that it was sent to them legally. So, if you have the videographer sending the footage to them physically, that would be fine, but it does leave a question mark about where the legal rights are coming from. The only really avenue I see is if there's some way that the videographer had obtained a license for the footage, then the videographer would have the ability to take that license and then transfer the footage over to Netflix. But if the footage belongs to Diddy, then that's a little bit tough.
That's a good point. Okay, let's keep that in mind. We'll talk about that in a minute. I do want to talk about the content of the series. So the series featured interviews with many people.
The result is often a chain reaction. And that chain reaction appears to be happening right now. Across social media, thousands of people are dissecting every available detail. Some believe the new claims could significantly strengthen existing cases. Others argue that it's far too early to draw conclusions. The truth is that nobody outside the legal process knows exactly how this will play out. But what cannot be denied is the impact. The impact is enormous. Public perception matters. Reputation matters. And when legal disputes begin generating nonstop headlines, the consequences can spread far beyond a courtroom. That's exactly what appears to be happening. Every new allegation creates another wave of scrutiny. Every wave of scrutiny generates more public discussion. And every public discussion increases pressure. Pressure from the media. Pressure from critics. Pressure from observers who are closely monitoring every development. It's a cycle that becomes incredibly difficult to stop once it gains momentum. And momentum.
Who were at one point in Combs' inner circle. This includes Aubrey O'Day, who was a member of the girl group Danity Kane, which was created on Combs' MTV show Making the Band. She has since accused Combs of basically grooming her, firing her for refusing to give in to his alleged sexual advances. We have Albie Shore, singer, songwriter, former record executive, dated Kim Porter before she was in a relationship with Combs. There's Roger Bonds, one of Combs' apparent former bodyguards, who's gone on the record to say that he knew Combs was allegedly physically violent with his then-girlfriend, Cassie. At one point in his interview with the documentary's producers, he said of Combs, "When I first met him, I liked him as a person because I didn't know him." You have Kalina Harper, who was part of Combs' group Diddy Dirty Money, released a statement supporting him after the third member of that group, Dawn Richard, had filed a lawsuit against Combs. And in the documentary, Combs can be heard calling Harper to complain about the lawsuit, asking her to put out a statement. A former friend, business partner of Combs, who appears throughout the documentary, is Kirk Burroughs, the co-founder of Bad Boy Records. The two apparently worked very closely together for years. Burroughs served as the general manager, handling the rapidly growing company's funds. And according to Burroughs, when they started Bad Boy, Burroughs was given a 25% stake in the company, with the other 75% being in Combs' mother's name, Janice Combs' name. And we're going to get more into why Burroughs alleges it was set up that way in just a second. But according to Burroughs, Combs allegedly threatened him in 1996 with a baseball bat, forcing him to sign over his stake. So Burroughs apparently sued in 2003. The lawsuit was thrown out because too much time had passed since the alleged incident. And more recently, Burroughs sued Janice Combs for fraud, Combs himself for sexual harassment. This is according to a report from Cinemaholic. And those appear to be ongoing, by the way. Now, Burroughs claims that he was blacklisted from the entertainment industry, led to periods of homelessness. He's since re-entered the music industry, starting Pop Life Entertainment in 2018. This is also per Cinemaholic. So, Elizabeth, there's a lot here. But what did you make of the Burroughs part, where he was proving, you know, this kind of relationship that he had, and that he was coerced into giving up his stake in what would become a multi-million-dollar company? I mean, I guess the allegation is basically that Diddy ruined his life.
Yeah, that was there are a lot of difficult moments in the documentary. I watched all 4 episodes as mentioned, and that was a tough one. And again, information that we hadn't really seen before in prior documentaries. So, this is someone who had co-founded Bad Boy Entertainment with him. A lot of the things he was saying seemed to kind of run along the theme that I think prosecutors were trying to push in the actual case, was that in the prosecutor's view, this is somebody who will do anything to basically get what he wants. He doesn't really care what effects or damage that causes to other people. And it's in different ways, right? Whether it's in the context of alleged abuse, business disputes, alleged sexual assaults, things that have been alleged in the civil lawsuits against him. And I think with Burroughs, it was really, kind of seemed to strike that theme as well, because he's saying, he had forced me out of the stake of my company. He had to deal with things like homelessness, while in the 2000s and 2010s, Diddy was really prospering, music, business, fashion. And one of the things that he had said, what he alleged in the documentary, and again, this is an allegation from him, was that the name Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs's name was not really involved in that on the corporate side. And one of the things he's saying is the reason for that was to avoid having to pay any liability from, the devastating basketball game that had happened in the early 90s, where he was the subject of wrongful death lawsuits because of the multiple deaths that had occurred as a result of that basketball game that Diddy was behind organizing. So that was really...
is exactly what this story has. What's especially remarkable is how quickly the conversation changed after the lawsuit surfaced. Before the filing, many people believed the controversy had reached a predictable stage. They thought the major developments were already known. They assumed future updates would simply involve legal arguments over existing claims. That assumption didn't last long. The new filing forced everyone to reconsider. Suddenly, people began wondering whether additional surprises could still be waiting around the corner. Could more lawsuits appear? Could new witnesses emerge? Could entirely new accusations enter the conversation? Nobody knows. But uncertainty alone is powerful. In high-profile legal situations, uncertainty often becomes a story of its own. The public fills information gaps with speculation. Commentators develop theories. Supporters and critics argue endlessly. And before long, The narrative expands far beyond
was racist. The original way that it was applied was racist. The way it's applied here is incorrect because he was not making any money from quote unquote pimping or getting these women across, or men getting them across state lines. None of that was being done. This was all being done for entertainment purposes. So it's an interesting argument. I don't think this judge buys it. It might be interesting on an appeal, but I don't think the judge is going to give him a judgment of acquittal on those 2 counts based on the argument. Now, the more interesting argument to me, and it's their last argument for new trial, is that, listen, if you were just going to charge him with these 2 counts, which I originally said when I looked at all the evidence, and don't forget, I was getting calls during this trial from individuals that were telling me, hey, I have information that exonerates what they're saying against Sean Combs, essentially saying that Cassie and others were participating more than just having sex in a room. They were participating more than that. They were paying people. They were hiring people. They were sending me pictures even when Diddy wasn't around. They were asking me to come over even when Diddy wasn't around. These were what these witnesses were telling me, which is really Brady evidence. And I don't know if that was ever turned over. But the more interesting argument is that all these counts were charged. The only thing he was convicted of were the Mann Acts. And he probably wouldn't have been convicted of these Mann Acts, but for all this other stuff that came in to try and prove these counts that they could not prove and did not have a basis for bringing.
Let me just challenge you on that, because this is a jury who didn't find that there was sex trafficking. And I can't confirm that they found him guilty of the Mann Act because of the hotel video or anything else. I mean, it seems to me that they might have convicted him on that based on the travel records, the payment receipts, all about that. Not even necessarily allegations of violence. I mean, do you think that it was because of, let's say, the Intercontinental Hotel video that he was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution? It always felt to me that they proved that charge based purely on, the documents.
Well, I always feel like during a trial, whenever you get a guilty verdict on one of the counts or 2 of the counts out of 6 or 7, you think to yourself, is it because of these other things that they brought up? How bad he is, he's not a good guy, the video came out. Sometimes juries will split the baby, meaning, there's people that want to convict, there's people that don't want to convict, and they're like, okay, let's convict him on these acts. We can all agree we can convict him on these acts. He's not a good guy. He transported these men across state lines. Let's convict him on this. There's always going to be a question of that. The only way to not have a question of that, obviously, is when the jury comes out, someone gives an interview and says, hey, this is why we did it, is because, this tape was so bad and these other incidents were so bad that we were like, we can't just let him walk with nothing. So we convicted him on the Mann Acts. Now, we don't have a juror saying that. Do I think eventually jurors are going to start coming out? Yeah, I think so. I think some of these jurors are going to come out. They're going to want to do some interviews, not before sentencing. And I think after sentencing, I think some of them will come out and we'll discuss it, because I think that was the feeling I was getting from this jury and the reactions they had to Comey's closing and even the reaction
on the original dispute. That's exactly what seems to be unfolding now. The lawsuit has become more than a lawsuit. It's become a catalyst for debate, a catalyst for investigation, a catalyst for countless discussions about what might happen next. And those discussions are happening everywhere. Some observers believe the legal pressure has reached unprecedented levels. Others argue that legal systems are designed specifically to examine claims carefully and methodically, regardless of media attention. Both perspectives continue to dominate the conversation. Meanwhile, the headlines keep coming. Every hour seems to produce another article, another analysis, another opinion, another prediction. The sheer volume of attention is staggering. And that attention creates another challenge. Because once public interest reaches this level, every development becomes magnified.
Just in general, to the 5 or the 6 U.S. attorney team, I think their reactions in general were very noticeable. And I think that this is a jury that wants to talk to people once I think he gets sentenced.
Okay, so now let's move on to the pardon discussion. So if he can't get relief from the court in getting the conviction thrown out or a new trial, can he get relief through a pardon? Before we talk about, is this a real thing, what is the process to even obtain a federal pardon? How do you even go about that?
Sure. So it's a pardon or a commutation. If someone is actually in custody, they could also get a commutation, which does not wipe the crime off your record. It just allows you to get out of jail. So he has that option to give him a commutation. If he gets sentenced, he can also give him a commutation. But as for the process, there's an application on the DOJ website, and I'm part of some charities that also do a lot of pro bono work for pardons and commutations. You can fill out this form, DOJ website. It essentially lists, the reasons why you should get a pardon, what kind of community service you've done, things of that nature. There's a separate application for commutation, but you can file a pardon application, and you could also say, hey, listen, if it's not a pardon, I'm looking for a commutation. You attach your indictment. You would reasons why you feel your crime was you were unfairly prejudiced or unfairly convicted. All of those things go into the packet. I always try to help people that are filling it out on their own to show them, what to point out. Those type of cases are always heartening, because those people deserve pardons. They deserve commutations if they're in, and it's some sort of crazy drug offense that was brought up in the 90s. All of those things are reasons for pardons and commutations.
So is this real? I mean, here's the thing. He is in a much better position to get a pardon or a commutation of his sentence because he wasn't convicted of sex trafficking and racketeering. There is a way to justify this based on some of the arguments I just mentioned that his defense team is making, that maybe he shouldn't have been brought up on this. The I-Man Act, not as serious as what he's facing. Is this real? Do you think that this is going to happen, that he's going to get a pardon or a commutation from President Trump?
So I don't know if he's going to get one. I do think that it's real because, like I said before, President Trump, whether they like him, don't like him, if he feels something is wrong, and we've seen this happen before in the past, if he feels something is wrong, someone got railroaded, someone was convicted, wrongfully, he will take a look at that. Yeah, Sean Combs has said things in the past that probably were not great. I've read them, but I think that if anyone understands that, I mean, look at President Trump's cabinet. There's individuals on his cabinet. His vice president has said things in the past that weren't great for him. But he understands that people evolve, people change their minds. People understand that there's certain requirements, things that are going on, certain pressures that they're under. And I don't think that would affect whether or not he would grant a pardon or commutation based on things that were said in the past. I think it would be based on what he gets sentenced to, or based on the facts of the Mann Act, that the Mann Act itself, I think, is unconstitutional. I think there's issues the way that it was applied in this case.
A routine filing becomes breaking news. A brief statement becomes a national discussion. A procedural update becomes a trending topic. Everything feels larger. Everything feels more dramatic. Everything feels more significant. Whether that perception accurately reflects reality is another question entirely. But perception often drives public conversation. And right now, public conversation is moving faster than ever. What's perhaps most surprising is how many people are now asking whether this legal battle has reached a turning point. Not because anyone knows the outcome. Not because any court decision has suddenly resolved everything. But because the latest lawsuit introduced a new layer of uncertainty. A new layer of complexity. A new layer of questions. Questions that may take months or even years to answer. That's the reality of major legal disputes. The process is rarely quick. It's rarely simple. And it's almost never predictable. People searching for immediate answers.
But from an optics point of view, moral point of view, what about everything that came out of trial? The texts, the bruises, the intercontinental tape. It's not like you can say Diddy is totally clean, that he's a complete angel. Yes, he was acquitted of the most serious charges, but the evidence that came out during the course of the trial, wouldn't it be difficult for the president to justify maybe pardoning Diddy? Maybe it is a commutation. Maybe it is, if he gets 5 years, he says, okay, I'm commuting it down to 2 or 2.5. I don't know how it would work, but that's the part that I think people might be struggling with, and what you heard, I think, from Megyn Kelly.
And even his own lawyers, no one was coming out here saying that Sean Combs is an angel, that Sean Combs doesn't do anything that is off the wall, crazy. These things. No one is claiming that. And in fact, even during my interviews, when I was saying things that weren't so popular, saying like, listen, he's only going to get convicted of these Mann Acts. I don't think he's going to get convicted of anything. And people were attacking me and saying like, oh, you like, abusers. That's not the point here. The point is to look at the law, apply the law fairly, apply the facts to the law. That's what's important here. And that's what I was doing when I was looking at the case. Looking at this from that standpoint, he's going to have been in for about 15 or 16 months by the time he gets sentenced. It's not like he got a freebie. If he got a misdemeanor battery, he would have served 364 days in jail. If he got a couple charges, maybe he would have served 2 years in jail. If this judge decides to give him 4 or 5 years based on this, do I think that's unfair? Yes. Do I think President Trump would look at that and say this needs to be communed to time served or communed down to, 18 months because he is 15 months in? I think so. I think that would be the fair thing to do. Whether or not he does it, I have no idea. I mean, I don't think President Trump does things because it's popular and unpopular all the time. People seem to think that a lot of people in politics do things that the masses are like, oh, this is unpopular or this is popular. President Trump does what is the right thing to do. And if he feels this is the right thing to do, I think that he would then do it. That's my opinion. I don't think he's looking.
That's an explanation.
That's
an explanation. No, that's at least an explanation, because a lot of people would say, I don't know what he has to gain by doing this. But by you saying, if he just, hey, I don't care where it puts me politically, but if I think it's the right thing, if I think there's an injustice, then I'm going to do it. I mean, look, he has pardoned other celebrities, not just Lil Wayne and Kodak Black, but Todd and Julie Chrisley, right? Rapper NBA Youngboy. Is there something about the celebrity aspect that might be influencing his decision?
Well, I don't know if it's the celebrity aspect or that those individuals, some of those individuals he knew, he knew them or he had entered with them. So he knows more about those individuals than just some president. Don't forget, this is part of pop culture. This president was famous before he was president. He wasn't a senator. He wasn't some sort of political guy. He was famous because he associated with a lot of individuals that he now sees get charged with crimes. He was charged with a crime that he felt was unfair, that it was unfairly applied. Other people felt it was unfairly applied. When you look at those instances, all those things that combine, and he understands that people get charged simply because who they are, I think this gives him a unique look into the criminal justice system that generally 99% of the presidents that have come before him do not have. That is the key here. The key is he has been in the shoes of other defendants.
Do you think that this is affected by Maureen Comey, right? She was the leader.
Are usually disappointed. Courtrooms move according to evidence, procedures, and legal standards, not social media timelines. But because of what it represents escalation. It represents uncertainty. It represents the possibility that the story is far from over. And if history has taught us anything about major legal controversies, it's that stories that seem impossible to get bigger somehow find ways to grow even larger. That's what makes this latest development so significant. It isn't merely another headline. It's another chapter. Another chapter in a saga that has already produced countless twists, endless debate, and a level of public attention few legal cases ever experience. The biggest question now is simple. What comes next? Will this lawsuit dramatically reshape the legal landscape? Will additional claims emerge? Will future developments validate some assumptions while completely destroying others? At this stage, nobody can say with certainty. But one thing is clear. The controversy isn't fading. The scrutiny isn't slowing. And the legal nightmare that has dominated headlines for so long may have just entered its most unpredictable chapter yet. As the courts continue their work and new information emerges, the world will be watching closely. Because in a story already filled with shocking developments, the latest lawsuit has convinced many people of one thing. The final chapter may still be a very long way away.